Hello everybody, Snowflarky Zemos, and I'm here today to talk about my Dragon Paladins deck. This is a deck that is quite a bit of fun to bring out in a playground environment, just a way to utilize the Ritual Paladin cards and some of the monsters they can go into. It's a deck that moves along pretty well. Will summon out your rituals, and your rituals can get you out other monsters. Um, and the paladin, the newer paladin dragons, that aren't the old paladin of white dragon, all have pretty decent battle themed effects, and I'm a big fan of battle themed effects. And just had all these cards, so I figured I'd put something together. It's a very low power level deck, so it's a fun deck for me to bring out against beginners and new players who don't have a lot. Um, and in low power level environments, pretty fun and lets me get to use some cool cards. So definitely take some notes if you're a fan of the Paladin cards. They're always really cool looking cards, so I'm happy to have at least something I can play using them in a very casual environment. Starting off with our monsters, I am playing two copies of Paladin of Dark Dragon. Now this is probably the weakest of the Dragon Paladins that I am playing in the deck. It is a 4-star ritual monster with 1900 attack, as are all the Dragon Paladins, which is pretty nice because 4 stars just means it doesn't take a lot to get the tributes required for them. So you can ritual summon this with Dark Dragon Ritual, and at the start of the damage step, if this card attacks a defense position monster, you can destroy that monster by card effects. They're pretty cool. You don't have to worry about triggering flip effects or, if the monster has higher defense, it's just if it attacks a defense position monster, it destroys it. Pretty cool. Definitely the weakest of the battle effects of the paladins I am running. But the big payoff for playing a couple copies of Paladin of Dark Dragon is that you can tribute this card to special summon a Red Eyes monster from your hand or deck. And you can only use that effect once per turn. So that is a pretty cool effect because that can be any Red Eyes monster, and that includes Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon, which is usually what you want to go for, which is then pretty cool because you can reborn this card or any other dragons that are already in your graveyard to further out your plays. Next up, I'm playing two copies of Knight of Armor Dragon. This is the new paladin that came out for the Armed Dragon card in Blazing Vortex. So it doesn't find a home in the Armed Dragon deck, but this deck is kind of built around playing with the paladin, so figured I'd try it out here. So you can ritual summon this card with Armed Dragon Ritual, and then at the start of the damage step, if this card battles a monster that was special summoned from the extra deck, you can shuffle that monster back into the deck. So, non-targeting, non-destruction of removal for an extra deck monster, it shuffles it back in. That's a pretty good way to deny an extra deck monster's field presence, gets around a lot of protections, and will shuffle it back, which usually doesn't trigger any effects. So definitely cool. Definitely the one where you'll find its battle effect kind of the most useful. And then, of course, you can you contribute this card to special summon a level 5 or higher Wind Dragon monster from your hand or deck. You can only use each effect of Knight of Armor Dragon once per turn. So pretty cool card. That battle removal is pretty nice, and we do have a target that we tribute into it. It's designed for you to go into the Armed Dragon, of course, like Armed Dragon level 5 to start climbing. But we're doing things a little differently with this here, which we'll see in a bit. Next up, I am playing two copies of Paladin of Storm Dragon. This is the Cyber Paladin card, which I find pretty useful. 1900 4-star ritual like the other one, which you can ritual summon with Signet Ritual. And of course, at the damage step, if this card attacks a monster, you can return that monster to the hand. So I like having some copies of this one in mind, just because not everything that an opponent leaves on the field is summoned from the extra deck. So if I want to just bounce something back to the hand that's not from the extra deck, and I need to remove it that way, I got copies of Paladin of Storm Dragon that can do so. And then, of course, you contribute this card to special summon a level 5 or higher Cyberse monster from your hand or deck, but it cannot activate its effects this turn. Not too much of a big deal, but we do have a target for that we will go into as well. So a lot of awesome cards to have at our disposal, and I'm glad to be playing them. Next up, I'm going to go into our targets that we will summon off the Paladin of Dark Dragon. So as I discussed with Paladin of Dark Dragon, we will go into Red Eye's Darkness Metal Dragon. Pretty good card. You can special summon this card from your hand by banishing a face-up dragon type monster you control. And then of course once per turn you can special summon a dragon type monster from your hand or graveyard. There is an errata on this card that changes it a little bit from this text, so do keep that in mind. But as far as this deck goes, it serves its purpose pretty well, and the errata does not bother it too much. And then I'm also playing a copy of Red Eye's Black Dragon. So kind of my choice, just because it's a thing I like to do. I'm a big fan of normal monsters, so I've kind of built a secondary strategy that's around utilizing the normal monster synergies that can be pulled out of this deck. So, you know, having a Red Eyes Black Dragon on hand if I need the normal monster at the time instead is a nice option to have. So I am playing one copy of each. Next up, I am playing one copy of Luster Dragon. Luster Dragon is in here because I'm going all in on the normal monster secondary package for this deck. And Luster Dragon is the strongest wind wind dragon monster that I can summon off of it. You know, there's no normal dragons that are any bigger than this. So, makes it a bit weaker with the 2,400. Luckily, it's with the one that you summon off of the Knight of Armor Dragon, which tends to be the one we want to keep around more. But it's still nice to have this option, and because of going in on the normal deck package, I get to show off my cool holographic Luster Dragon. I should note that this card is actually Luster Dragon number 2, but this card is misprinted to just say Luster Dragon, so pretty cool. Just thought you should know, because you're going to not find the same card if you just look up Luster Dragon. Next up, I am playing one copy of Suppression Collider, and this is our last normal monster payoff. This is the one that the Paladin of Storm Dragon will summon, your level 5 or higher Cyberse monster. Now, of course, that one would negate its effects, but since it's a normal monster, we are not too worried about that. 2,800, big attack monster. Makes it very powerful, and we'll show some of the normal monster payoffs later. Next up, we are playing Incantations in this deck to help facilitate and get our ritual summon. So I'm playing two copies of Incantation Talismandra. So this is the one that you reveal a ritual monster in your hand to special summon both this card from your hand and then one incantation monster from your deck except Talismandra. And of course, if this card is special summoned from the deck, you can add a ritual monster from the deck to your hand. You can only use one Incantation Talismandra effect per turn. And of course, while incantations are sitting on the field, you can't special summon from the extra deck. So incantations are pretty cool. Talismandra is one of the most important ones. If you're short a crucial ritual monster, this is the one you want to summon from the deck. But if it's in your hand and you need to get a ritual spell from Kandal, you can reveal that monster to summon Talismandra. Talismandra, definitely though, if you need a ritual monster from the deck, is the one you should be looking to summon from the deck. Next up, I am playing two copies of Incantation Kandal. Incantation Kandal is the spell equivalent of Talismandra. You can reveal a ritual spell in your hand to special summon both this card and one incantation monster from your deck other than Incantation Kandal. And of course, if this card is special summoned from the deck, you can add a ritual spell from the deck to your hand. So this is the one that you summon if you need the ritual spell. And of course, like all incantations while it's sitting on the field, you cannot special summon extra deck monsters. And the nice thing is that Kandal here is 4 stars, just enough to tribute just the one of it for any of our Paladin monsters, which is pretty cool. Next, I am playing one copy of Incantation Bookstone. This is one of the ones that we kind of want to see in our hand to start things off, and since it doesn't pull from the deck, it's less useful. So Incantation Bookstone says you can reveal a ritual spell in your hand, special summon this card, and one incantation monster that is not Incantation Bookstone. And of course, if this card is special summoned from the deck, you can target a ritual spell in your graveyard and add it back to your hand. So pretty cool way to get a ritual spell back from your grave if you do it, but normally you want to be using that first effect and then pulling out either the Talismandra or the Candle, whichever one you are looking for. And of course, while it's on the field, you cannot summon extra deck monsters. And of course, the last incantation to talk about is a copy of Incantation Pencil Plume. You can reveal a ritual monster in your hand, special summon both this card and one incantation other than Incantation Pencil Bloom. If this card is special summoned, you can target a ritual monster in your graveyard and add it to your hand. You can only use the effects once per turn, and you cannot special summon extra deck monsters while it's on the field. So Pencil Plume is definitely the worst of our incantations just because it is 3 stars, which means one of it is not enough to ritual summon for our Paladin dragon rituals. But, you know, sometimes the fact that sometimes we need a spell and we only have a monster, Pencil Plume is good to have to get things started. Pull us that Candle out of the deck, which is, you know, will get us the spell that we're missing. So important to have at least a copy of it. And that is it for our monster lineup. Next up, we're going into our spell card lineup. We are starting with 2 copies of Dark Dragon Ritual. This is the ritual card that will summon our Paladin of Dark Dragon, which is the Red Eyes one. So this card is used to ritual summon Paladin of Dark Dragon. You must also tribute monsters from your hand and or field whose levels equal 4 or more. And then of course, during your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard to add a Red Eyes spell or trap card from the deck to your hand. So I'm currently not utilizing that second effect just because there wasn't a Red Eyes card that I wanted to see enough. But I'm certainly looking into a way to utilize that, so it can probably be done too. You know, anything that gets a card out of the deck can be pretty nice. And there's a number of different ways this deck can be played. This is kind of just a general beginner version, but I definitely know I can craft this to be even better of a deck, so that's something I'm keeping in mind for the future, and will keep you updated as I figure that out. Next up, I am playing 2 copies of Armor Dragon Ritual. This is the one that summons the Knight of Armored Dragon ritual monster. So this card is used to ritual summon Knight of Armored Dragon. You must also tribute monsters from your hand or field whose total levels equal 4 or more. Then of course, during your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish monsters from your hand or face-up field whose total levels equal 4 or more. Then you banish this card from your graveyard, and if you do, special summon a Knight of Armor Dragon from your graveyard. So if you summon Knight of Armor Dragon and it leaves, you get to summon it again by the following turn by banishing this card and, you know, the appropriate ritual tributes from your grave, so even gives it some recursion. Pretty cool. Definitely means you're not afraid to tribute it off or use its effect to bring out your Luster Dragon and then pull it back out as soon as you need its effect to get rid of an extra deck monster again. Pretty cool. Next up, I am playing 2 copies of Signet Ritual. This is the Cyberse ritual spell that we use to pull out our Paladin of Storm Dragon. Now, of course, this card says, in addition to being able to ritual summon Paladin of Storm Dragon, if you control no monsters, you can banish this card and 1 ritual monster from the graveyard to special summon 2 Signet tokens, which are, you know, level 4 Cyberse tokens. But you cannot activate this effect during the turn this card was sent to the graveyard. So definitely gives you some token materials for you to do stuff with. It's either, you know, stuff in the extra deck, more materials from future ritual summons. Not an effect that comes up too often for me in this build, but cool thing to have. And last, I am playing 1 copy of Incantation Inception. This is the Incantation ritual spell, and of course this card can be used to ritual summon any ritual monster as long as you are tributing incantation monsters as the tributes to make that ritual summon, which is usually how we're doing it, so definitely not a drawback and allows us to, have a generic ritual spell that can get out any of our ritual monsters, even if we are missing their, of course, spell. And of course, this card does have a second effect that, let me make sure I read it right. You can send an incantation card from your hand or face-up field to the graveyard, except incantation inception, to special summon an incantation monster from your deck, then add this card from your graveyard back to your hand. So a way to get another incantation back out, and of course get this card back into your hand. Pretty cool effect. Ritual decks certainly love incantations. They're some of my favorite support to come out because it just lets you play so many different ritual strategies, and it's a good card to have to balance things out. Next up, I'm playing 3 copies of Pre-Preparations of Rites. Pretty good card for ritual decks to gain card advantage. You add a ritual spell card from the deck to your hand, and then you add a ritual monster whose name is specifically listed on that card from your deck or graveyard to your hand as well. So do note that this does not work with the Paladin of Storm Dragon and Signet Ritual, because Signet Ritual does not mention Paladin of Storm Dragon on the card, but it does work with your Dark Dragon Ritual to get your Paladin of Dark Dragon, and it does work with your Armor Dragon Ritual to get your Knight of Armored Dragon. So that's enough targets that definitely warrants me playing it. And it's a card I definitely want to see because it can gain me card advantage and get things moving. So I'm playing it at 3 because I do want to see it. Now you can only activate one of this a turn, but that's okay. You'll follow it up on a future turn with that. Next up, this is the first of going into my normal monster payoffs. I am playing 2 copies of Flawless Perfection of the Tenyi. This is a pretty cool field spell for non-effect monsters that said all non-effect monsters on the field are unaffected by monster effects, which is pretty powerful. And then once per turn, if your opponent special summons an effect monster while you control a face-down monster or a non-effect monster, except during the damage step, you can draw 2 cards. So, having this field spell with one of your big vanilla beaters that you go into off of your Storm Dragon means that, you have a big monster that's unaffected by monster effects, which makes it harder to take out, since monster effects are kind of the most common way in current Yu-Gi-Oh! To get rid of monsters. And it also allows you to give you 2 additional cards, which means you'll have additional resources for a follow-up turn play in case your board gets wiped, and to just be able to do more onto your next turn. Pretty cool card. Definitely a big fan, and I play lots of decks that utilize this card, as you've probably seen if you've watched some of the videos on my channel. Next up, playing a Terraforming to search it. It's a card I want to see. Thins a card out of the deck. Terraforming is a pretty good card. And of course, last on the spells, I am playing 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance. Now, as many of you here on the channel know, I'm not a big extra deck combo heavy player. I certainly just have not invested the resources because it's not a playstyle I'm a huge fan of. And even if I did have those, great extra deck materials, this deck is certainly not a deck that can, create just a big extra deck game-winning board just because it doesn't summon enough monsters or combo hard enough to do so. So I figure the extra deck is better spent into additional card advantage. By banishing 3 to 6 random cards from the extra deck face down, I can draw a card for every 3 that I did. So by banishing 6 extra deck monsters, it becomes Pot of Greed, and I draw 2. I can't use any other draw cards on the turn this card is used, but do note that that does not stop your pre-preparation of rites. It does not stop your incantations from adding stuff to the hand. Only cards that draw. So the only thing that would be stopped is a Flawless Perfection that draws us cards on our turn. So, pretty cool card. Definitely pretty good. Keeps things moving. If you're not using the extra deck, it's definitely a card that has to be played. And that is it for the spell cards. Last here, we want to go into some of the trap cards this deck is playing. So we'll start by showing off 2. Fists of the Unrivaled Tenyi. This is a card that says when a spell or trap card or monster effect is activated while you control a face-up non-effect monster, negate the activation. And of course, if this set card you control is destroyed by your opponent's card effect, you can special summon a non-effect monster from your extra deck. So the Red Eyes, the Luster Dragon number 2, the Suppression Collider being left on the field means that Fist of the Unrivaled Tenyi is live to negate a spell or trap or monster effect, which is pretty big. Do note on that monster effect one that Fist of the Unrivaled Tenyi does not destroy the monster, so usually better utilized to negate crucial spells or traps. And so for that reason, free negate without cost. If you want a card that is more flexible and you wanted to abandon a normal monster package, you could of course just play Solemn Judgment, which is at 3. But, it's often I'm ending with a normal monster on the field, and figured I might as well save my life points and also have that secondary effect if my monsters if that card gets destroyed. Next up, I am playing 2 copies of Drytron Meteor Shower. Maybe a little overkill and bricky with the Fist and the Unrivaled Tenyi, but it's a card I wanted to try out. When your opponent normal or special summons a monster or monsters while you control a ritual monster, negate the summon, and if you do, shuffle that monster into the deck. Now you can only activate this card once per turn, which is, perfectly fine. Definitely a reason I'm only running 2 of it. But, also gives you a little bit of payoff if you leave one of your ritual monsters on the field for a turn with this set. Stop a crucial summon. Pretty cool card. Definitely something I want to try. It definitely makes me want to try out some more ideas with ritual stun decks. Which, if I was to play probably a better version of this deck, I would opt to go more in on that factor. You'll see that posted here if I decide to do so, but I made this deck originally here with it kind of in mind that it would be okay if it's a low power level, because I play it in just super casual playground settings. Next up, I'm playing 2 copies of Heavy Storm Duster. In the settings I play this in, there's lots of spell and trap cards being set, lots of cards being played, so I definitely like to destroy those, especially with the ability to +1 off of this card. Essentially, Heavy Storm Duster says that you can target up to 2 spell or traps on the field and destroy them. You cannot conduct your battle phase the turn you activate this card, which isn't a big deal if you're popping those cards on your opponent's turn, especially if they set cards and then you end by popping them with Heavy Storm Duster. Very cool. Just be very wary of waking the dragon. And of course, last on our trap lineup, I am playing 2 copies of Blazing Mirror Force. Definitely a Mirror Force that is picked specifically for my group. If you were wanting to play a Mirror Force card in this slot, I would recommend Storming is usually the best Mirror Force just because it sends everything back to the hand. But Blazing Mirror Force is when an opponent's monster declares an attack, you destroy as many attack position monsters your opponent controls as possible. And if you do, take damage equal to half the combined original attack of those monsters, and then inflict that damage to your opponent as well. So pretty cool card. It's just Mirror Force, but has an extra burn effect. Definitely a card I'm a big fan of in a lot of my stun decks, just because it destroys monsters. Usually the stun deck has a way that, the destruction is not a benefit, either by negating special summoning or just negating effects in general. And then, of course, the burn damage shortens the clock for my opponent to draw outs. So kind of that logic applies here. I've played this deck against lots of decks that are not destruction proof because it's a lower power level environment. So I use Blazing Mirror Force to clear the board, get some extra burn damage in that can help me push for an OTK on a following turn. But if you're looking for a better pick, Storming Mirror Force is, of course, a better Mirror Force card. And in general, you can switch out the trap card lineups to be absolute blowout cards, which, in general, if you wanted to make a better version of this deck, definitely switch out some of this lower power level stuff for just, very powerful hand traps or just blowout going second cards to, just say no to an opponent's first turn board. I'll work on doing that build, but for right now, it is as it is. And that is it for our main deck. Next, going into our extra deck, not a lot to talk about here because the extra deck, this deck is not built around going into and making great use of the extra deck. So I just have some targets for the things that we can do. First off are my targets to summon off of Fist of the Unrivaled Tenyi. That is, of course, 3 copies of Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. In here as 3 copies because, you know, I play Pot of Extravagance, so I want to make sure that usually the odds are there's still 1 of these around to summon off of after a resolved extravagance if my Fist of the Unrivaled Tenyi gets popped. And 4,500 attack non-effect monster, that's as big as it gets for the non-effects. Next up, I am playing 2 copies of Master of Oz. It would be 3 if I had a 3rd copy, but I only have 2. And it's not, I don't know, it's not urgent for me to pick up another one, so I've just been keeping it at that. Master of Oz is a 4,200 attack non-effect fusion monster, so just 300 attack less than Blue Eyes. And of course, last on this is just a copy of Meteor Bee Dragon next to Master of Oz. This is the next strongest, 3,500, no effect. So, you know, if all the Blue Eyes and Master of Oz were gone and this was all that was left, you would summon it. Otherwise, you'd just let it be extravagance fodder. Next, the rest of my extra deck cards are cards that are in here for me to side Waking the Dragon. I play a number of trap cards, so usually Waking the Dragon is in my sideboard, which is a trap card that states if this card is sent to the graveyard or banished because of an opponent's card effect, you know, special summon a monster from your deck or extra deck. So these are kind of the best targets from the extra deck to pull out. The first are 2 copies of Naturia Exterio. This is a 2,800 attack fusion monster that basically can negate spells or traps as many times as you want per turn. All you have to do is banish a card from your graveyard and then send the top card of your deck to the graveyard as the cost to do so. So in decks that are, you know, either back row reliant or can't do anything without their spells going off, you just summon Naturia Exterio and kind of end their game. Next up, I'm playing 1 copy of Raid Raptor Ultimate Falcon. This is just a 3,500 attack monster that is unaffected by card effects, so very hard for a lot of decks to deal with. You know, I would play more copies of this card, but I only have 1, and I'm holding out for El Dorado to get 2 more, just because, you know, why not? I'm going to be open and getting that set anyway, so not going to pick those up till after El Dorado comes out, but I would definitely play 3 of this. But because I'm not, I'm playing some, you know, lower power level substitutes, one of which includes 3 copies of Yugioh Mathmech Final Sigma. This is a 3,000 attack monster that's unaffected by card effects if you summon it in the extra monster zone, which you can do off of Waking the Dragon. It's 500 less attack, but, you know, usually not that big of a deal that it's only 3,000. And of course, this card has a nice secondary bonus effect that if this card does battle damage to an opponent's monster by battle, that the life point damage inflicted through that battle to the opponent is doubled. So, you know, you attack position monster, you do double the damage you would normally do. So pretty cool. Can definitely speed up the clock. And then last, playing 3 copies of Blue Eyes Alternative Ultimate Dragon. So this is a 4,500 attack monster that cannot be targeted or destroyed by card effects. Not as good as being unaffected by card effects, but still pretty good and sometimes worth that 4,500 attack, especially because if you need that extra attack to end a game. Definitely worth going into. And, you know, some decks, if they have targeting or only destruction effects available, then you know it's good to be going into this anyway. Has a secondary effect where that instead of battling with this monster, you can choose to pop a card on the field. So it can be pretty useful. Also a nice little tool to have, and definitely makes it worth considering. Well, folks, that is all the cards in the Paladin Dragons deck profile that I'm playing. Like I said, it's just a fun way to actually get to play the Paladin cards, you know, cards that look cool but are pretty bad. So, you know, if I break this out with some, you know, beginners or a real low power level environment, it can be a fun deck to work. Now, you know, if you wanted to play this deck as high power level as you possibly could, you know, you probably cut back on some of the monsters, you know, play less Paladin Dragons and kind of go for more blowout cards. Things like Rivalry of the Warlords to, you know, once you have set up with the Dragons, you can, you know, limit an opponent's field, you know, powerful floodgates that will hurt your opponent more than you, or just really powerful blowout cards, you know, good hand traps, you know, evenly matched, dark ruler no more, just just stuff that is a bit risky but very high power level to answer a typical really strong first turn board. So definitely adjustments to be made to boost this deck to a higher power level, but even with that in mind, it certainly is just a janky playground. You know, don't take it to locals, just bust it out for a wacky duel to show off something, and maybe you'll get to do some cool plays. And honestly, that's worth it for me, since most of these cards were sitting in my collection. I was like, I better figure out something to do with them. Um, but anyway, that's it for this deck profile. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below which of the Paladin Dragon Ritual cards is your favorite, even if it's one that's not in the deck, like the classic Blue Eyes one or the Galaxy Eyes one I know exists. Um, but with that, hope you enjoyed. I'll catch you all in the next one. Take care.